Aktiedagen i Stockholm. Varmt välkommen du som följer oss på online. Vi har kommit fram till nästa bolag i en lång rad av spännande tillväxtbolag. Nu har turen kommit till Saniona som är ett bolag som jobbar med utveckling av medicin för, eller rätt sagt mot, viktproblem. Så vi kommer att göra den här intervjua Jørgen Drejer via Zoom. So warm welcome Jørgen Drejer, founder and CSO of Saniona. How are you doing, Jørgen?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm sorry that we could not physically be in Stockholm today, so I'm just joining in via Zoom from Copenhagen.
Oh,
yeah, I'm
so
Jørgen.
nice to do.
So I'm Jørgen Drejer, as you mentioned. I'm the founder of Saniona, and now I'm heading up the research team here in Copenhagen. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it has been a very significant development in Saniona over the past year, and that has led to a major transformation of the company. And that also now includes new activities in the US. So this transformation, that's based on three major events. First of all, we had very, very nice phase 2 data for our leading product, Tesomet, in two indications. And then we also hired a new US-based CEO, and we had a major raise of capital from top-tier US investors very recently. And that will now enable us to do essentially everything that we had hoped for. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about this, where we are today as a rare disease focused company. So first a forward-looking statement slide, and now showing the new Saniona executive team, which is completely new, as I said. So we got our new CEO, Rami Levine, in place in Boston early this year, and you can see the whole new executive team here with the new Chief Medical Officer, Rudy, Jason, CFO, Trista, Communications Officer, and Linnea, Head of Human Resources. And then myself, I'm the only one now in Copenhagen. The rest of the team is based in our new office in Boston. So Rami here has a very strong background from the rare disease space. In particular, I could emphasize Sobi here, which most Swedes should know, a very successful rare disease company. And Rami was heading up the US part of that and led the commercial operation there. So it's a completely different background than I had, a research background. And that's because this is where Saniona is going towards the commercial. So we think we have a very unique opportunity for building a global rare disease company with a base in US. And the US is important for us because that's where the most heavy professional life science investors are. And that's also where there's the strongest awareness around the rare diseases. And this was actually also where we got most of the money from the new finance round. So just one slide talking about where we are with the company. So we are a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focused on rare diseases with high unmet medical need. And we have the product Tesomet in clinical development, late stage clinical development in two indications, in hypothalamic obesity and Pradaville Syndrome, both rare diseases with a very high unmet medical need. And we know now that it works in both of these indications, and we have the ambitions of bringing it all the way to the market in both the indications. So it's important to note that we also have already met with the FDA 2 times in the Pradaville Syndrome, 1 time on hypothalamic obesity. So it's just a very initial meeting. And we see now a clear path lining up how the final development should look to get the product to the final stages of development. But Saniona is not just Tesomet. Saniona is also what we have here in Copenhagen, our unique ion channel drug discovery platform. And based on this, we have made several partnerships with big pharma partners over the years, with Pfizer, with J&J, with Boehringer. But now we are also pushing compounds forward into our own rare disease pipeline from this. So it's the compound SAN711 for rare neuropathic disorders, now ready to enter into phase 1, and it's SAN903 for rare inflammatory disorders, for instance, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. That should be about 1 year behind of 711. So this will really fuel our internal pipeline. I mentioned the partnerships, and we have made several of those, and we also made quite a few spin-outs of the company. We have mentioned the Cadent company, which came out of Saniona. Some of you also know Scandion Oncology, listed in Stockholm. And we have the Boehringer agreement here as a partnership. And then, of course, most importantly, the tesofensine product, which is very close to approval now. We hope our partner Medix in Mexico completed the phase 3 studies in obesity about a year ago, no more than a year ago, found very nice data and filed the application for approval about a year ago. So we are really waiting for that one to be approved. So in the bottom here, we talk about the raise of $65 million. That's a major milestone for us. It was led by respected US capital funds, and that is a very strong validation for us. And RA Capital, most people in this industry knows, and also Pontifax and New Leaf went to some of the real top tier. And this raise of a major raise of $65 million really enables us to do everything that we need to do, full speed ahead on all of these 4 programs. So pipeline overview, just showing the same thing in a different format. Tesomet in the top here, the SAN711 903, and then the partnerships down here. I'll talk quite a bit more about the Tesomet product. And this is how it works. It increases levels of dopamine, serotonin, noradrenaline, 3 important transmitters in the brain. And it's very important for controlling the brain's reward center, the brain's appetite center. And that is something that's really important to control when you talk about weight control, eating disorders. That is, you can reduce the craving by this mechanism, reduce appetite, but you can also increase the metabolic fat burn. And this really addresses the unmet need in Pradaville Syndrome and also in hypothalamic obesity. This is really tailor-made for that. So about hypothalamic obesity. This disease is caused by physical damage to the brain in this area called the hypothalamus, where the appetite center actually is. And that leads to a very rapid and very intractable weight gain in these patients. And really nothing helps on that. Even bariatric surgery has a very poor outcome. There are also other problems that leads to that these patients are very difficult to treat. And in general, their lives can be very difficult. It's a rare disease, 1 out in 50,000 patients. About that, we are doing more careful analysis of those data now. And we decided to do a study in Denmark. It was a phase 2 double-blind study, and it was run with a placebo arm and a Tesomet arm, 0.5 milligram for 6 months. And we read out the data here in April for the first 6 months for the double-blind part of the study, and it came out really, really nice. I'll show you some of the data. And then it continued into a 6-month open-label extension study with the same dose. All patients got the same. So we are really eagerly waiting for the readout of this pretty soon, where we have now patients that have been treated for up to 1 year, and now all of the patients have been on 0.5 milligram. So what we saw was a very significant effect on weight. So if we look at the weight curve here, and the two lines, the blue for tesomet and the gray for placebo, already at 3 months, there was a very strong separation, highly statistically significant separation of the two lines, and it ended up at a weight difference of 6.28%, which is quite dramatic in this patient population. And if you look careful, you might see that this is actually tending downwards. We're hoping to see even more in a longer study, and here the placebo is tending upwards. Now, what does this 6.3% of weight difference mean? It means a lot because, as I said, these patients are extremely difficult to treat. They have a physical damage to the brain, but it actually meant that 62% of the patients lost more than 5% of weight, and 38% of the patients lost more than 10% of weight, and essentially no effect in placebo. And when you compare that to what FDA are looking for in a general weight loss treatment, it's living up to all the criteria that's set up by the FDA, and certainly should also do that in this much more difficult to treat patient population. So it is a lot. So interestingly, there was also 2 diabetic patients in the study. Of course, it's well known that if you have such a dramatic weight loss, there's high risk that you would also develop type 2 diabetes. And by coincidence, these 2 diabetic patients both ended up in the tesomet treatment group. And here we saw a quite dramatic 49% decrease in the blood glucose parameter measured by this HbA1c. So if this really holds true also in larger studies, it could really mean a change in the life perspective for these patients. So we are ready to go forward now, had the first pre-IND meeting with the FDA and discussed this plan for the phase 2b study. And it looks like this could really go forward in this way with a placebo, 2 doses of tesomet, 9 months treatment, and then read out the placebo control part of it. This could be the basis for an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA, and then continuing into an open label extension. So now to Pradaville syndrome, which is also some of my favorite indications to talk about. And this slide really shows what our primary investigator from the phase 2 study said when she had been treating these patients, both adult and teenagers. So she really is very confident that tesomet will make a difference for these patients. Again, there's no treatment today for those patients. And such a statement really is important for our commitment to try to bring this all the way to the patients. Now, Pradaville syndrome also is a disease where you have really problems with eating control. Actually, there's no eating control. There's a very clear hyperphagia, which means that these patients will not have any ability to control their food intake. They have an obsession with food, and they feel a constant urge to eat. They have also other problems with intellectual disabilities, and it's a significant burden on caregivers and families. And when you look at the clinical studies, you use this hyperphagia score that is actually filled out by the caregivers as a measure. There are also few of these patients, about 1 out in 20,000. We are also doing careful analysis of that now. It's caused by a genetic defect on chromosome 15, and that is really what disturbs this eating behavior completely. So the study that we did in Pradaville syndrome was a very small study, exploratory study, done in Hungary and Czech Republic. And it was really to get some information about different patient groups and also different doses, different treatment lengths. And we studied both adult patients and also teenagers. We studied 0.5 milligram, and here you can see 0.125, 0.25 milligram. and got a lot of information about this out from this very small study. So I've shown many of these data before. Just show one slide here showing the effect on the adult patients in body weight and hyperphagia. And what we saw was, as expected, as we hoped for, a very quite dramatic decrease in body weight over the 3 months of treatment here with Tesomet 0.5 milligram in the adults, whereas the placebos didn't change their weight. But I think what's even more remarkable than the weight is actually the effect on hyperphagia, which is very, very difficult to treat. Again, this score, which is called HQCT score, talks about the hyperphagia. And it actually started at a score of 10, and then it decreased by 10, which means that this hyperphagia essentially disappeared during the study. And actually early on, already after 28 days, more or less disappeared. In the beginning, there was apparently also some effect on placebo, but that more or less went away during the 3 months treatment. So very, very interesting data indeed. And we did the same study in teenagers at different doses, and also again at the highest dose here, we saw that we could not only blunt out the otherwise increase in weight that you would see in the teenagers, you actually saw a decrease in weight during the study. And also on hyperphagia, we saw that we were able to maintain that hyperphagia very low during the whole study. Now to what we are going to do forward with the Pradaville Syndrome. As I mentioned, we have met with the FDA here in May, first time, also a pre-IND meeting, had a very, very positive feedback. Clearly, they are interested in helping us getting the first product in this indication. We had another meeting with the FDA recently, and they are now have paved out the way how we should do the final clinical development of this drug in this indication. So a 4 months double-blind study is what we are discussing with placebo and 3 different doses of Tesomet. And then read out here, which would be the basis for an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA. And then after that, we would just follow up again with a 9 months open label extension, 2 of the doses, so that we in total have been running for more than 1 year in this study. And this, by the end of the phase 2 of the placebo-controlled part of the study, we should be able to initiate the discussions about phase 3 studies. So in summary, Saniona is now very well financed to actually advance with full speed the late-stage development of Tesomet in 2 serious rare diseases, and we have already shown that it works. But there's more than that. We also are kicking off the 2 early-stage programs from our quite unique ion channel platform, and that should go into the clinic soon. We also are now completing the build-up of the US organization, and that has already transformed Saniona into a company that has global ambitions and also ambitions of bringing our own drugs out to the patients. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jørgen, for your interesting presentation. I would like to start with comparing you with your former competitors, because I understand that the Pradaville Syndrome has a background of a lot of failures in studies run by your competitors, and we quite recently learned that they have problems with their studies actually. So that includes Milendo Therapeutics, Soleno and Levo Therapeutics. So my question would be, what are you doing differently from them?
Yeah, we are all doing very different things. We have different approaches to how to treat this very difficult disease. So
Yes.
Milendo had a very specific approach about a ghrelin mechanism, which is relevant for weight control, but perhaps not that relevant for Pradaville syndrome. So it's a very, very specific approach that's not really known whether it's relevant for Pradaville syndrome. And it turned out completely negative. There was no efficacy of that compound. You mentioned Soleno. They took an old compound that's already registered and tried that in this indication. They came out with negative data in their phase 2 study, and now also in the phase 3 study, they were not successful in reaching their primary endpoint. They did see something at a subtype of the patients, and they may consider to continue in that subgroup of patients.
Mm.
And with Evo, sorry.
Did those failures from those studies, even if they were all very different from the studies that or the research that you are doing, did it affect you in any way, or did it make it easier for you to talk with the regulating institutions or something like that?
Yeah, of course you can say there's both pros and cons on that. Of course, it's in some way easier for us now that all the competitors seem to be lying down. So there's definitely a very strong focus from the CNS division of the FDA to try to get something to these patients. So they are really trying to help us in any way they can. And that might have been different if there already were 2 drugs on the market. So, but of course, the backside of the coin is that as you started by saying, there may be a perception that this is impossible in this indication. We definitely don't think this is impossible. We know this drug is very effective in controlling the eating behavior, and we've demonstrated that in several different patient populations now. So I think what we're doing different compared to the competitors is that we are actually working downstream. We are working on all the mechanisms, downstream from all the mechanisms that control weight gain, or appetite. We are working where we are just looking at the signals that comes from that. And that is a universal mechanism that should work in all patients. And we also now can see it does.
Thank you. I have one quite practical question. I would like to know a little bit about how is Tesomet distributed into the bodies of the patients? Maybe you talked about that, but I didn't understand. Is it like a tablet, or how are they getting it?
Yes, this is a very simple administration form. It's a tablet, a very small tablet, because it's an extremely potent compound, and it's given once a day.
And is it very? Do they have to take it at a special time, or is it liberal in that way?
We always try to keep it standardized so that you take the tablet in the morning, but it could also be done differently. But
okay.
this is.
Yeah. In your studies, is it necessary to combine the treatment with a specific exercise or a specific diet?
We have a lot of experience with the drug on doing those kind of things, combining it with exercise or diet, but it has not been done in these studies, and you might be able to get a little more efficacy if you do it that way, but it's not necessary.
So the effects are not caused by partly or mainly by a new exercise or diet. That is.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
It's two things. One is control of the appetite, so you don't feel the need to eat, and then there's an effect on the cravings. So some people feel they have an urge to eat all of the time.
Yeah,
if there's chocolate in front of them, they would eat.
That's the
and
problem.
that craving is also taken away, at least diminished quite dramatically. And then on top of that, it actually increases the fat burn.
Okay.
And it's a triple pill.
Yes. So let's talk about your financial situation. After the new issues of shares that you mentioned, it amounted to 65 million US dollars. This is, you did not only inject capital in your company, but it also changed the shareholders list a bit, I understand. How is this affecting the company?
Yeah, I think it's a huge privilege for us now to have these very professional US funds into the company. They are just investing in life science and only in the very, very best companies. So this really gives us a level up in the investor base in general. And this was a major goal for us to actually get institutional investors in. So far, Saniona has mainly been a company listed in Sweden with small private investors. So this is a completely change in shareholder structure.
Okay, thank you. We have one question from the online audience. Let me read it out for you. How is it going with the NS2359 study?
Yeah, I wish I knew, because this is actually not in Saniona's hands.
Could you describe the background a little bit for?
Sure. NS2359 is a compound that will work on in animal models against cocaine addiction. So we have some ambition there, but it's also an old compound. So the patent life on the original compound, the composition of matter patent, is run out. We have some other formulation patents and so on, but it's not a compound that we decided to invest in ourselves. So the thing was that some US investigators wanted to test it out in cocaine addiction, and they started a study actually several years ago. They have recruited, I think, around 50 patients in that study, and we are still waiting for the results, for the readout of that. It has been going very slow, so we have now taken it out of our slide presentation because we are not in control, and
okay.
we are.
But the shareholders, they never forget, you know that. So, but now you cleared that out. Thank you so much.
I'd love to see something from that, but it's going that slow.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, you have a new CEO in Rami Levin. I know he was, I think, one of the persons behind the new issues of shares. What else has he done by now in order to develop the company? What is his strength?
Yeah, no, as I mentioned, he has a commercial background, has been in many different pharma companies, and also very important now in the rare disease space. So that was very important to get a profile like him into the company. But he has definitely also now delivered. I think the change of the company from a research company now to a company with global ambitions in the rare disease space is really his accomplishment. And also this financing round in the US, we have been doing a number of small rounds in Scandinavia, but now taking these very important heavy US investors in, that is really his accomplishment. And then finally, I think the build of the US organization is also a major step forward for us. We didn't have a real development organization in Saniona. We were depending on consultants, and now we are building this very strong team in the US, going all the way to regulatory and also into commercial. So that is a person like Rami that you need to get there.
Okay, so he is attracting those people, are you saying, or?
Yes, he is. He knows how to build a team. When he came into Sobi US, I think there were about 18 employees, and ended up with several hundred employees.
And he is a full-time worker for Saniona, or is he?
Oh, definitely. Working? Yeah, the whole executive team in US is of course, full-time.
Okay.
So that's also a change from consultants and so on to really full-time, very, very experienced people.
Okay, so now after he has seen to the financial situation and capitalized the company, what is his main what is Rami Levin's, and of course what is your most important target to work with right now, specifically?
Yeah, clearly we want to bring Tesomet to the market, and that takes a lot of additional work. Late stage development is very taking a lot of resources, and to get to the final studies in Pradaville Syndrome, Hypothalamic Obesity, that is a major task, but I'm sure that Rami will bring us there.
Yeah, and I think you will have a big part of that work too. Thank you so much, Jørgen, for joining us here today from Copenhagen. So thank you so much, and good luck with your company, and Jørgen, stay safe.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Yeah.